seeing as how it is 7 o'clock, actually a minute past, almost 2 minutes past.
Recording in progress.
Alrighty, we will call this meeting of the Bylaw Study Committee to order. Our first agenda item is to hear public input. It's a public forum to hear comments, suggestions, and recommendations from members of the public. I do not see any members of the public in the meeting room here. I see one attendee on Zoom. So seeing as how we're here to hear input from the public, I will ask our Zoom attendees to raise their hands if they wish to speak. And if they just wish to listen, that's fine as well. Going once. Going twice. Our one Zoom attendee so far has raised the hand. Let us you are now allowed to speak. So, Stevie Paler, good evening. The hand is raised. You are enabled for talking if you want to speak. As far as I know, we should be hearing you if you're talking. Our attendee is having a problem with his audio. He's going to log out and log back in. Waiting for him to reconnect.
Name, rank, and serial number when he gets back on. Just to make sure he's calling from Grafton and he's not joining the wrong Zoom altogether to start with.
Yes. Haven't heard any stories about that recently, but there was, during the first few months of everybody going to Zoom, there were all sorts of stories about Zoom bombing.
Yeah.
All right. Looks like we now have 2 attendees having joined the meeting. So once again, I will invite attendees to raise their hands if they wish to speak to this meeting. And just as a reminder, we're here to collect public comments and suggestions for Grafton general bylaw items that might need to be updated. New bylaws that might be needed, bylaws that might need to be changed, bylaws that maybe are obsolete and we shouldn't have anymore. All comments along these lines would be most welcome. So, if any of you attendees would care to, if you want to speak, just please raise your hand and we'll put you in the meeting. And Stevie Paler says he's unable to diagnose his problem. So just a note to anybody listening that if you are unable to get connected into this meeting, you're always welcome to, if you're attendees and you can't have audio trouble, you can type your comment into the Q&A here in the Zoom, or you can always submit comments to the committee via the committee's page on the town's website. We will be happy to accept any and all comments now or later, all the way through our process, as a matter of fact. And hearing none, we have couple of other agenda items we can move on to. I suspect things will be fairly quick. Maybe Greg can get into his other meeting. All right, so just as a note for, I think we probably already all heard this, but Ray Mead has resigned from this committee and has been replaced by Andy Jefferson. The select board last week appointed Andy as their representative to this committee. And he's not present tonight because he had another meeting, and he had communicated that to me a couple days ago. So, moving on with our agenda, this is probably fairly brief, an update on this.
Dave, sorry, just quickly on that last point. Have the necessary changes been made to the committee email serve?
Yes.
So Ray's
Yes.
been replaced by Andy.
First thing Monday morning, I asked Cindy to update the email, so the
Sorry
email
for
list
going
should be,
out.
the committee's email list should be current.
Okay.
There's some things showing in Q&A. Have you already seen that?
Let's see. Yes. All right. Yeah, that's from
Okay.
from Mr. Paler, who was unable to get his audio working, and the latest is just, okay, thank you. I can submit my questions at a later date. I appreciate your effort.
Okay.
Anyway, as far as the stakeholder responses are concerned, a few more have been rolling in. We did send out, I think, a few days ago, probably toward the end of the week before last, I think it went out to the stakeholders that had not already responded. And last week we got a few additional responses in response to that. the select board was going to take this up at their meeting last night, which they had to cancel because of website problems on Friday that prevented the meeting notice from being timely posted. So the select board will be including this item on their agenda next week. So hopefully we will hear from them. Hopefully we'll hear from a few more at least. By my count, let me just double check. I think I've counted 14 responses. 14 out of 29 have been received so far.
I've got 16.
My count might not. I might have missed one or two.
And I think one of those was a question. I saw the response and your reply to the chair of the historical commission.
Yes, the Historic District Commission.
Yeah, I didn't know if we wanted to consider that closed as far as feedback goes, or leave.
Yeah, I perhaps should have been more explicit about asking them. Please, you answered a different question.
Sure.
So I might just tickle them and follow up on that. But so we will continue as things go along. I know we had hoped to have everybody responding by now, but we also kind of knew that wouldn't necessarily happen. And there may be some committees that just aren't going to bother to respond. At least one, I'm pretty sure, hasn't met in a couple of years. The Agricultural Commission. So we'll work with what we get. Put it that way. And so that's really all I have at the moment. Anybody else have anything on the stakeholder responses?
Yeah, so kind of tying the stakeholder responses into the action items list. One of the things that we talked about at the last meeting was possibly pulling together a list of any articles where the stakeholders that we anticipated reaching out to or soliciting responses for had all gotten back to us. Either it was a one for one, or if there were several, then we've heard back from all of them. I've got a list of 11 articles that are closed from that perspective, and so if it kind of goes into how we want to move forward. If those would be kind of ripe for the picking for us to dive into, see if committee members have anything that they want to dive into or proceed. There's at least 11 that could be good candidates.
Yeah, that gets us into that next agenda item, doesn't it? I think we briefly touched on that idea at the last meeting, that for those action items that we think we have, or those bylaw articles, maybe, but where we think we have all the stakeholder responses we were expecting, we could pick those as things to start working on. And I don't know that we're necessarily prepared to go through that list tonight, but I think that's really, we do need to talk about getting to work on starting on actually preparing some bylaw updates for consideration.
So, had we, well, we're kind of, I guess, have we got any time from council to say exactly what belongs in the bylaws versus the charter yet?
We got some, I had some discussion, an email discussion with council several weeks ago, and I think I forwarded that email thread to the committee. And I think I got at least a general sense from council of the kinds of things that belong in the charter and the kinds of things that belong in the bylaw. And I don't remember off the top of my head what that was, but it was kind of, sort of broadly, it was sort of, details tend to go in the bylaws, and generalities go in the charter. So it may be that we need some things where we have some thoughts. We may need to take things up on a case-by-case basis with council for specifics.
Yeah, as you mentioned, the Agricultural Commission. Well, the Agricultural Commission isn't even on the list of how you get on there in the bylaws. Doesn't exist. It's not appointed by the selectman, and it's not appointed by the town moderator or the town administrator. They're gone off of that list. There's things in here. The tree wardens seem to come in and go out, maybe be in the charter and not in the bylaws anymore. And kind of seemed to be eliminated. Then it was brought back in a different way, and then next thing you know, we have the shade tree bylaw where the tree warden's in there and being appointed in different ways. But the statute dictates the appointment of a tree warden. So unless, I don't think that we can change that in the bylaws. I think if we're going to change how you appoint a tree warden, you'd have to do it through the home rule charter kind of thing. So, like, these guys don't.
Yeah, that's sort of brings up an interesting topic that I've been doing some digging on. Is the general topic of how boards and committees, what created the boards and the board or committee, and who defines, where is the appointing authority and the membership defined? And some of that's in the general laws, some of that's in the charter, some of that's in the bylaw. The tree warden, I think, is an example of something that in the general laws, and I can't quote you the section off the top of my head, but somewhere buried in my notes, in the general laws, there's a section of a chapter of the general laws that enumerates a whole bunch of town officials, individual officers, boards, and committees that are to be elected, unless another method of appointment is specified by bylaw. So what that says, that sort of provides the default, and then since we don't elect very many people anymore, the charter kind of spelled out a lot of, the charter has to spell out some of that, but also you can simply spell it out in bylaws. So I've been working and going through and trying to identify all these sorts of things to help us see what the bylaw should and should not say, where the bylaw needs to say something, because, and there's also a sort of a point of clarification we'll want to get from town council in this regard. But where the general laws say that you elect such and such an official, we need to make sure that either in the charter or the bylaw, we say how that official gets designated, appointed.
Right. When I look and I'm just bring the tree warden up because I had them in here, and they zigzag, appear and disappear and reappear.
Yeah.
I stuck that in Massachusetts, and it kind of said that the select board appoints them. So it used to be an elected position.
Yep.
And I think, well, actually, now I don't remember if it's, but it's the same idea as what you're talking about is, if it's in here, why is it in here, and does it belong in here? Do we have to sync this list up with the charter list? What's going on? Because it seems like some of this stuff has disappeared over time, and I don't think it's intentional.
Quite possible.
Which I've had some comments at time to time of in seeing bylaws in other towns kept in a fashion unlike ours, where we don't annotate the existing bylaws. We publish much like we do the charter, with the exception of the changes that we seem to make willy-nilly in between charter reviews, a new charter. And, okay, here's the charter that's effective on this date. So that we wouldn't, get it all formatted and everything, because there's a lot of format issues in here and a lot of cut and pasted. And
Yeah.
I don't know whether it's different versions of Word and stuff got bumped over or what, because some of them there's holes, some of them there's complete entire sections they're copied there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the charter has some formatting and cut and paste issues. But
So does the bylaws.
so yeah, the bylaw has, the bylaw, there's, I'd have to look through my notes, but there's one place in the bylaw where the same thing appears twice because it was actually voted twice. It was done that way by explicit town meeting, but it's like someone didn't notice that we had already done it, so they're going to do it again.
Yeah.
There's a number of things on this topic of appointments. That whole section of the charter that lists all the appointments, I think, get a pretty clear sense from town council that we should basically set that aside. Because I think she basically agreed with me when I said it's in the charter in the section entitled Transitional Provisions, which was meant to be, these are, you got to do this in bylaw, but until you update the bylaws, here's what it should be. So the bylaws were then updated. That section of the charter really ought to be eliminated.
In those kind of questions kind of got asked at the charter review, and it seemed that the charter review folks just wanted to talk about the 3 or 4 things that were there
Right.
and didn't want to go through the rest of the charter.
Yeah,
So maybe
yeah,
that's some frustration with it too.
Right. So that's something I got fairly clear from council, is that whole list of appointments really no longer belongs in the charter. And we can consider how we want to handle that. She said maybe just a sort of a note in the charter that says this section should no longer be considered part of the charter. But ideally we update the charter document somehow to separate that or eliminate it. So that's one source of confusion with respect to appointments. That,
I think there's a bunch of lingo in the charter that remains that should go under the same premise.
yes.
And I think there's some stuff in here that should
Yeah, there may
be
some
severely
minor-
redone, but
But yeah, there's that whole first so many pages of the charter, the way it's printed, which is, it's the report of the charter committee. It's not part of the charter. And we
right,
talked
and
about this before.
yeah, and that does not belong in there at all.
No.
And that's what I was saying, is you could have a preface to it or a report, that should almost be in the town report
Yeah.
for the year.
So we
Yeah,
can,
I think that was just a document that was presented at town meeting and somehow got rolled
Incorporated
into the-
into
yeah,
whole-
one that was
somebody
used.
didn't really think too deeply about what should the actual charter document contain.
Right.
And, the way I left my discussion with council is, we'll probably want to circle back with council for some, more, sort of a detailed advice on what to do with the charter document itself. What can we do with the charter document to clean it up without actually requiring a town meeting vote to change the charter?
Well, you could
Because-
either ignore it or change the charter.
Because what part of that charter document is the charter?
Yeah.
That town meeting and the voters must change. And what part of the charter document is not the charter proper, and thus you can do anything you want with it? And, I left that with Ginny as just,
I think the front part is
we're gonna wanna.
to be the closest you're gonna come to saying it's not part of the charter, but
We're gonna wanna talk about that, clarify that, but that wasn't our immediate concern of the bylaw committee, but ultimately, I think we've recognized and acknowledged the issue, and as part of our work, I'm perfectly comfortable having us work out the details and get that charter document fixed up so
Oh.
it's more,
as an aside to this, we can present a charter change now, the way things seem to go. I mean, and that's, again, that's why I didn't like people changing the bylaws without having a standing bylaw committee review it and see how it fits in.
Yep.
But
So we'll keep working on that. I was just.
So, just to get a little bit more up to date then, Brian, how have individual folks, how have we shared what individual people may have sent, like what I sent to you?
Yeah, so, and I thought I sent after the last meeting, or maybe the last couple meetings that we had, kind of the latest version. But, so it exists in this action items Excel list. That's largely the same format as what you had sent over with your items, with a handful of, additional columns that, hopefully when we start working through things, we'll use for tracking and comments and what are we doing with this point that somebody has raised and now we have to do something with it. So that list, and I'm about halfway through adding in your items, so probably when I'm done with those, it'd be right to send out a full new version to the committee. But as it stands, we're sitting at about 160 lines worth of items.
Yeah.
So, and then that runs the full gamut from, some of those formatting and typo type fixes that, based on some of our previous conversations, may or may not actually require us to vote to clean up, all the way down to more substantive things like, we were talking about addressing, pronouns used in the document, at the last meeting, and we've now had 2 stakeholders raise the potential and urging us to consider noise bylaws, to give some clarity to a point that seems to raise its ugly head, and there's just not a lot of Grafton specific guidance to give people to follow. So, what we've got on this list kind of runs the gamut, but I think we need to, I think the main holes are the 10 or so stakeholders that we're yet to hear from. The biggest ones that we've been talking about, the select board has a large number of items that we've asked them to comment on. The town administrator, and actually one that escaped my mind at the last meeting, but when I was going through the details, we're actually asking the DPW for feedback on a larger number of articles too. And those 3 are all still outstanding. So once we start hearing back from some of those larger stakeholders, we'll have much more than the 11 articles that we currently have that are closed from a stakeholder feedback perspective, and we can start sinking our teeth into.
Yeah. So you still have some updating to do on the action item list?
Yeah, I mean, so I've updated it for all of the stakeholder feedback that we've received through the last week or so. Skip sent me about 100 lines last week that I'm about halfway through, and that'll be it that I've got currently for updates.
Yeah. So maybe what can happen is complete the update of that list, the action item list. You can identify those for which, basically bylaw articles for which we've received all the comments we expect to receive. That can serve as, we can then sit down at our next meeting and choose. Let's get to work. And, probably
Right.
each one of us can volunteer to work on certain things,
Sure.
or somehow we can start picking out things that let's get to work on this article,
Yep.
or this part of this article. I mean, there could be some complication to say this bylaw article has several sections or several different things that can be worked on. But yeah, start to tackle the actual updating.
Yeah, one of the things that I kind of brought up, and I don't know if you've gotten down to it yet or not, but was the some of the articles, I guess, seem to me to have been written by someone else.
That's not on the comp.
And it's not. The closest thing I could think of at work is, we have lines of business that were programmed, but it's like one programmer does it one way and one does it a completely
Oh, yeah.
different way, and it's like, what the hell? They're all in the same system. And it kind of dovetails into this he, she, it, we, you, they thing. Several of them I brought up is I wish that we could just take and have a definition section in the bylaw. And one of them to take away the having to worry about offending anybody because there's a he or a she or a e, whatever you want to say, is you just define wherever he, she, it, whatever you want to call it, appears, it means this. But if you go and look and see, there's only a couple of the bylaws that are left, or sections of them, that mention he's or anything. And they're written kind of weird. One of the things that we had brought up or brought to our attention, and I think, Dave, you mentioned this, is you gotta stop with this strange English that people use and just come to the point and say what you mean. Just for example, one of the things it's talking about in the town clerk. Before entering upon the duties of his office, the town clerk shall give bond to the town. Well, before starting his job, or before starting the job, the town clerk shall give bond to the town. Just take it right out. There's weird stuff in here that instead of just replacing the his with some non-denominational word that makes everybody happy that in 5 years some people will be upset by, just take the reference out to it.
Right, where that can be done in a way that makes any sense at all, that's one way to deal with that pronoun problem.
Yeah.
Is you can avoid the use of pronouns where it makes any sense at all to do so. We can simply avoid the use of gendered pronouns.
Any pronouns.
Avoid the use of pronouns altogether. Very often, as in that example, I think that reads perfectly well without a pronoun.
I think there's a lot in that there are certain sections in the bylaw where somebody wrote his all the time. In other places, it looks like they've been quote unquote sanitized to remove any gender specific stuff.
Yeah, we can look for opportunities like that.
Yeah.
To,
it cleans up the wording of the particular thing as well. Doesn't make it like Old English.
Yeah. One of the things I noticed that there are some bylaw sections that were basically someone took a model bylaw that someone else that put together and they write it in a certain style. It gets back to what and I saw plenty of that in my days of doing software. That everybody has their own style of writing.
Well,
There's some pretty amusing examples that I can, but without going off the deep end on that.
Yeah.
To a certain degree, at least, I would feel comfortable, having the language kind of matched up with the general use of language in the bylaws. Occasionally, I worry, and a specific example that I worry a little bit about is there's a couple of bylaws where the section, most of the times we identify sections, article such and such, section such and such. There's one or two articles where they call the sections chapters.
That's in the end of my thing. That tends to happen at the end.
Now the thing I worry about with that is if you have something else, some other document somewhere that says references Grafton bylaws, article such and such, chapter such and such. If we change the word chapter to section, now somebody else is looking for it says chapter 3 and I don't see the chapter 3 here. So things that can be referenced from somewhere else, you want to be at least a little bit careful about changing things like numbers, article numbers, section.
Yeah, and that we've given to the town clerk through town meeting the ability to fix
to renumber section. We do that.
Renumber, take care of.
The reason I bring this up is I'm reluctant to renumber things because there may be external references to it.
Now,
I have that problem in the zoning bylaw referencing particular sections of the subdivision rules that no longer exist. So when I updated the subdivision rules, I made a point of not changing numbers, section numbers and subsection numbers. because I've seen that problem.
So what I would tell you would fix that was what I was talking about with publishing the bylaws, is you have your regulations that are done on a certain date. Clearly, they make reference to a set of bylaws that existed on that date and those sections. So if you keep a book that's unaltered of the bylaws as they exist on any given time, you clearly can go from one edition to the next. You don't have to worry about that because it makes reference to something. I think the way that you address that is that chapter versus section tends to happen at the end, where there are a bunch of things that are probably new and aren't elsewhere yet. It might be easy to take to the suggestors and ask if they made some sort of regulation afterwards that makes reference to these.
So that's, that simply makes a point that we need to be careful about that. And generally speaking, I would love to change chapter to section wherever it appears. Just be
Hesitant, wonder whether.
I want to be convinced that that's not going to cause a problem.
I see two places where we have chapters and sections, and that's CPC and AHT. And CPC's been around for 20 years, and AHT's pretty close to that.
Yeah,
But,
I wonder why.
It was probably that they probably started with CPC. There was suggested bylaw wording from the state, so we adopted that, and then AHT adopted.
Yeah, and
based on the previous.
There's some of these newer things that are in here towards the end, where it's obvious they copied and pasted, and there was bracketed places to insert Grafton stuff. And they adopted the thing that has the bracketed, put Joe's name in, whoever you want to contact or whatever it is, put it in the air.
I picked up a couple of those. That you can just clean that. Those some of those things are going to be pretty easy to clean up. Yeah, and even a 20-year-old CPC bylaw, if it's divided into chapters, that's the kind of thing that I suspect no other document is likely to be referencing chapter such and such of article such and such.
Mm-hmm. Now, which one's a CPC? Is it towards the end? Yeah, so that's
30s.
And who knows? If you go back to a prior version of the bylaws, it may have been these were chapters instead of sections.
I think that would have been have to be an explicit change.
Yeah, CPC is 34.
Yeah, CPC is an example. I'm certain that was simply copied from a model CPC bylaw, and we took the text from the model bylaw, tweaked it to tweaked it where necessary to be specific to Grafton, but otherwise left the wording as is.
Yeah.
And there will be a number of bylaws that look like that we just adopted from somewhere else, and the way they wrote it is good enough.
Yeah. So I was also noticing that Skip had asked earlier about the Agricultural Commission, why it's not listed in the list of committees that it appoints, because it has its own article that says it's appointed by the select board.
This gets back to the data I'm working on, trying to collect together for all the boards and committees. Where is it defined?
Yep.
Where is the appointing authority defined? And what I would like to ultimately, but the reason I'm working on this is I would like to avoid having more than one place in the bylaw say who appoints this.
Yep.
There's sort of a catch-all for all the select board appointments and all the town administrator appointments. And while that's going to be necessary for certain boards and committees and officers, I don't want to have that section and another section both saying who the appointing authority is. I want to avoid redundancy in that.
Redundancy or creation of conflict, that's sure to cause.
Right, and that's
like
why
the
you don't
CIPC
want
cleanup
redundancy
at
is
the
because
last town meeting.
there's the potential for conflict. So I've been working on that and trying to. And every time I sit down and work on it, I find something new. But
Find
that's,
another rabbit hole to go down.
yeah, but that's something I have been working on precisely so that we can eliminate the potential for such conflicts in the bylaw. And yes, it would be nice to have one place where you list every board and committee and who the appointing authority is, but a section of the bylaw is not that place.
You know, I was thinking of putting a informational thing here, but perhaps it would even go better just on the town's website of, who appoints what to where.
That's another one of the reasons why I'm working on this list. I kind of started out, I started this list by going through the town website and trying to pull together all of the boards and committees.
Yeah.
And then the town website is incomplete. There are some boards and committees that are named in the bylaw that are not on the website. But one of my objectives is this is on the town website for every board and committee. I'd like to see the committee charge or whatever, whether it's a charge or a bylaw or whatever. This is what defines the committee, and this is who the appointing authority is, and this is where you find that.
Take the last town report that we have and go through the list of them.
We also have
That should be a good, double checker to
Lots-
see this,
there are
at
lots-
least the list of them all.
lots of,
Yeah.
there's also the boards and committees information center, which actually is supposed to list the appointing authority. Just don't know how correct it is.
Not 100% accurate. It is made complicated by the fact that certain boards and committees have some members appointed, other members call them ex officio for better lack of, I think that's the right term.
Yes.
Yeah, they exist because another board or committee designates them as their representative. The select board's
Yeah.
representative to this committee, the planning board's representative to that committee. So, and then there are two cases of boards where some of the members are elected and some of them are appointed.
And then there's also
So-
some
so-
places where they list the lists on the website. They use the same column for who appoints them and what is their position in the committee. Like some place it'll say select board rep, or it'll also say chair in the same column. So if you've got both, you have to pick one or the other.
Yeah,
Yes.
so it's like it started off as one thing and somebody figured it'd be all okay, but then all of a sudden some other stuff comes in, and so you gotta expand the.
So
but-
part of it, at least, it appears to me as though they made this list without understanding some of the nuances.
Yeah.
So, you start out with a simple idea, and then you run into some complications that don't quite fit your simple idea. So there's some things that, that there's stuff we're gonna work on, but for the bylaw committee part of this work is, I'm looking to, to make sure that we don't duplicate things in a way that creates.
Yeah, so
potential
it
conflict.
kind
Yeah.
of getting around to the appointment list. Do we even
Yeah.
need the appointment list in there?
Right, as much as possible, I don't want to see that appointment list in there, except to the extent that this is the only place that identifies the appointing authority. Where if that particular section of the bylaw is the only place anywhere in the world, in the universe, where Grafton says this is how that body or that individual
Right,
gets
that
appointed.
should be there. That
that-
that belongs here.
But as an example, in this, the CPC, just to take that as an example, the CPC bylaw article spells out the appointing authority and it spells out the membership, of which 4 are appointed by the select board and the remaining members are appointed by their respective board. So that fits perfectly well in the CPC bylaw. You don't want to put that anywhere else. You don't want to.
No.
You don't want to put that in Article 1, Section 9 of the list of select board appointments.
Yeah. 4 members at large that are not otherwise appointed by the CPC. Refer to.
Yeah.
So, Haven't
So,
beaten that
so
one
there's,
stick.
you know, that's something I have been and will continue to work on, and it touches on a number of things here. But yeah, to get back to, you know, sort of get back to where we want to go from here. Yeah, I think Brian's got some work to do to update the action item list, and we can then go through that and we can identify, yeah, here are some bylaw articles or sections that we can start working on changing. You know, and we've talked before too about, you know, there's a set of changes which are basically editorial in nature, that are they're not substantive, but nevertheless we've identified them as things to do. And we'll, yeah, I'm more worried right now about getting to work on some of the more substantive changes.
Yeah, and it sounds a little crazy to say in November, you know, almost 11 months out, but I am starting to get concerned about the timeline. You know, it's like we're less than a year out for a committee that's supposed to have a year and a half plus ish charge, and we haven't started to bite into a lot of the substance yet.
Yeah, and we've right, and you know we've been basically gathering information, which we
Right.
need to do.
Yeah,
We've gathered enough information now that we can begin to work on putting together some proposed changes.
Let's put it this way. When we go back to the board that appointed us, and we are not done, we can say this is because of the failure of your predecessors to have done this every 5 years that's required. We should only be looking at the stuff that's happened over the last 5 years.
Right.
So if anybody wants to brawl about us not getting it done, it's say hello to 4 times what we should have had to do in this period of time. So we're gonna pat ourselves on the back and say we did a nice job.
We're catching up on 20 years worth of work in
Yeah.
a sense. But hey, we're gonna, you know, we'll do what we can.
Yeah.
But you know, you're absolutely right that we, you know, the timeline we'd put together had us somewhere before the end of January having a public forum for the public to discuss some of the changes that were proposed. So we kind of had an idea of, you know, having a fairly substantial set of proposed bylaw changes written up at least for the, you know, for a first round of public review by the end of January. That's not that far away.
you're right. Especially with the holidays in between.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, we might be able to squeeze 2 meetings in December. We're not likely to get another meeting in this month. Certainly not the 4th Thursday of this month.
No.
I think we all have things to do that day.
Yeah.
We'll be asleep by then anyways.
Yeah.
On account of excess ingestion of
Yeah.
tryptophan.
Yeah, so our next opportunity to meet, unless we want to do it sooner, and I'm not sure I do, our next opportunity to meet will be second Thursday of December, whatever that date is.
Yeah. It might be useful to meet next Thursday. We do have a new committee member, and we said one of the things we wanted to do was split up the articles that we figure are already complete
Yeah.
and talk about that. So maybe we have a short meeting for purposes of that.
Yep,
Well, after what I sent along to you and what you're adding it to, do you see any articles that don't need to be touched?
Oh, that's not what I meant. I meant the ones that we know we've received all the comments we were expecting, not the ones that are nothing to do.
Yeah.
right.
And I mean, frankly, there are some. I mean, there's, and although we got proposed changes to it, but the fire department bylaw is literally a paragraph. Now the chief would like to change the title of that bylaw and I think maybe do some other things, but there is some low hanging fruit. And I think, you know, there's definitely, like I said, there's 11 where we've received back all the stakeholder feedback that we solicited. We certainly may have our own thoughts, but I think to the extent we're not waiting on anybody else, let's start talking about what we want to change.
Yeah. When it comes, I did not comment on stuff like that.
Yeah.
That should be moved into the personnel bylaw. Because all it says is when you get to 65, you got to retire.
Yeah.
That's a
Personnel.
whatever you want to call what I used to be is where you fit into the employee classification plan.
The personnel
That-
bylaw is part of the bylaws, so that doesn't help.
No, that's what I'm saying, is you just move the personnel that thing, take it and put it into, and maybe further define exactly what that is.
Yeah, it's not clear that that needs to be its own bylaw.
Right, yeah, it doesn't.
Now, the fire chief was going to come to our meeting tonight, but he had, at the last minute, he had something else that came up, the conflict that came up, so he couldn't. But I had talked to him last week, and invited him to the meeting tonight. He was, like I said, he was gonna come, but he emailed me this morning to say that he couldn't make it. I just told him, you'd be welcome to meet with us anytime at your
Yeah,
convenience.
just say, hey, move this over there.
So if
Why is
we're
that
all comfortable
Article
with the meeting next week, Thursday, the 17th, to start looking through that action item list and picking things to get to work on, that would be good.
Yeah, I don't mind, I thrown that he, she, it, whatever you wanna call it, thing out and saying, move that into, try to create a definition thing. That might be hard because there's several places in the bylaw that the individual bylaws have definitions in them as well. And then you'd have to go looking at those definitions to make sure you weren't defining them or redefining them in the definitions and indicating that they were defined by virtue of a boldface type. Trying to sync all that stuff up.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I think after reading some of the particular bylaws where he is there, and there's a few others where they used other stuff like that, they seem to be, like I said, they like Old English, wheretofore art thou, kind of thing, where it's like, take this 3-sentence paragraph and put one line, and that's it.
There's some of that language is sort of old style legalese. And that's just the way we did it in colonial times.
Yeah, and one of the things they said when we were doing the thing before is, get rid of all that stuff. Make it very clear. Stop with this colon, semicolon, comma, 45-word long sentences.
Yes, and some of those, between super long sentences, complicated sentence structure, some, I don't know, there's some examples of just pure redundancy in language. This and that, where both words mean the exact same thing, like cease and desist as an example.
Yeah.
Stop.
Yeah.
Why do you have to say cease and desist? I'm going to cease, but I'm not going to desist, or
Right.
I'll desist, but I won't cease.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of that is just sort of traditional legal
terms, yeah.
usage.
Yeah. And you don't need those phrases.
No, but we can look for all that kind of thing that we want. But yeah, so we'll Brian will update the action item list. We'll get together next week, Thursday. We'll go through that and start picking things to work on. One of the candidates for things to work on are things where we believe we've gotten all the responses that we're going to get from stakeholders.
From anybody, yeah.
Right.
So things that we're not waiting for more input on. Having said that,
They'll
someone might
all come the last night.
Someone might come down and come out in 2 months and say, "Oh, by the way, this thing you thought we thought we were all done with it. Oh, by the way, did you think about this? Maybe we need to do this." So, I mean, that's going to happen throughout the process. But it's just we're at a point where we can start working on the updates.
Did anything come directly to you from the dog officer / animal control officer / whatever? There's another title that's used in some places.
She submitted some.
Yeah, we got it either through William and Dave, or it came to the whole.
Okay, and I just, like you said, I have not. I got a bunch of stuff taken care of, working on the computer thingy, and getting kind of back into this stuff. Because I talked to Candy and said, hey, what's the scoop with this? And it goes, that girl that she had CC'd, or woman or whomever. She said, oh yeah, that's the new dog officer / animal control officer.
Melinda McCann.
Yeah, and last I knew, Gene Ploss was doing that stuff, but
Yeah, that's been a while.
So,
Yeah, there was a little bit of controversy around the switch over from Gene to the new people.
change.
Yeah, change, for better or for worse.
Okay. No, I just wanted to make sure that that had occurred. Now I can go back and take the 8,000
Yep.
emails and kind of wade through them and.
Okay, so
Yeah, and stuff like that. So part of the action item list, I've got a tab that kind of summarizes the stakeholder responses, who we've heard from and when. It's got the date that the response was sent to the full committee, so that might help with some of the cross-referencing. But specifically for the animal control officer's feedback, she had sent an attachment with her proposed changes to the article, and so I've got that attached into the file. So kind of it's
Cool.
as much of a one-stop shop as we can make it. The same with the police chief. Some of the feedback that he sent last week. Both of the note on the noise control point, he sent some a sample bylaw language, and then he also mentioned some and sent a guide on non-criminal disposition. Those I've attached into the.
non-criminal disposition is another topic that it has been a topic of some controversy over the years. I forget how many years ago it was, but at one point we thought we'd just try to just generally adopt for all bylaws non-criminal disposition, and there was a lot of resistance to that. We have adopted non-criminal disposition in a few sections of the bylaw, but yeah, it's you know, since it's now been adopted in a few places in the bylaws, it's something that is worth reviewing.
Yeah. Oh,
As I
yeah.
said, it's in the past has met a lot of resistance for sort of a broad-based non-criminal disposition.
A lot of people don't want that aren't used to doing that sort of thing. Don't want to have any part of it. It's
Yep.
funny when that came up when I was on the Board of Health. We said, yeah, we're not interested in being involved in that because of the authority that you have on the Board of Health. It's virtually the same as a cop in many cases. So,
Yep.
you know, you don't follow, you don't want to pay attention to the first notice. Okay, we'll take you before a magistrate and you can go to jail. You know,
Yep. So, yeah, that's, as I said, that there's a history behind that topic
Yeah.
here in Grafton, but you know, I think we're in a good position in terms of the work that we're doing. We're in a good position to reevaluate that. And
yeah. Yep.
so we got some work. So we got some work to do, but good. I think we'll.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can next week we can really kind of begin to kick off our actual work revising the bylaws. We've been gathering information. We'll continue to do so, but it's fish or cut bait time to start working on the changes.
Yeah, I would obviously when we reach out to Andy to let him know about next week. If I know when we were setting our original meeting schedule, we were looking for times that work best for all of us. If for whatever reason the Thursday routine that we've been in doesn't work for him, or if he's got standing conflicts anywhere, I think we need to be open to.
Yeah. Right. We
considering
can
alternatives.
we can revise our meeting schedule as necessary to accommodate all of us. So I think in the limited discussion I've had with Andy, I don't think he has not expressed to me any issue with Thursdays.
Sure.
But we'll review that just to make sure that we're all okay. And with that said, if there is anything else on that topic, the one agenda item we have left is our minutes of the previous meeting.
I abstain. I can't have an opinion one way or the other. You can only hear me.
Yeah.
I move we approve the minutes of the meeting of October 20th as presented.
Second.
Moved and seconded, minutes be approved as presented. Any discussion? Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all those in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Skip
Abstain.
abstains. So the motion is carried by a vote of 3 in favor, none against, and 1 abstention. That's good. And with no further business, a motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded that this meeting be adjourned. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Declare the motion carried unanimously. This meeting is done. Thank you all.